Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Mount Silver. Mount Silver, a place with some of the strongest Pokemon you can capture. Only open to trainers of admirable skill. Professor Oak, as you know, will allow you to travel here once you beat the Elite Four, because he sees how well you battle, how well you treat your Pokemon. He allows you to travel to Mount Silver to take on its challenges. But is this truly the only reason? Surely there are other trainers than you that are deserving of this reward, right? So why you of all trainers? Why are you so special? Because you are the only one who can set him free. Other than the Pokemon Center that is located there, there are virtually no other people. There is one though, located at the tippy top of Mount Silver. Alone you should know him well. You were him once after all. Red. Red is a former apprentice of Professor Oak, receiving his Pokédex many years before you start your journey. After his travels, he, like you now, gained access to Mount Silver. After training here, he climbed to the top of Mount Silver and isolated himself from the rest of the world, training in solitude, losing contact with anyone and everyone who he considered worthwhile. He didn't call his mother, Professor Oak, or even his rival, who none of them had any clue what had happened to the boy. Any calls they sent were rejected or ignored. After a while, they stopped calling but Professor Oak, curious as to what had happened to the boy, climbed up to Mount Silver. Reaching its peak, it had been well over a few years since he had lost contact with Red. What he saw sent a wave of terror down his body. He saw Red, or rather, Red's lifeless body, in a corner of the chamber. When Professor Oak checked, it was cold. He'd been dead for a while now. He shuddered. Why had it suddenly become so cold in the room? He turned around, jumping backwards in surprise. He saw Red, sitting on a rock across the room, staring at him with a blank expression. His amber eyes were dull, and red lines had formed under his eyes. He had been crying with this. The Oak turned to the body, to Red, to the body, to Red. How could they both be Red? Red continued to stare at him, and Oak could only stare back in shock and terror. He watched as Red removed something from around his waist, and Oak recognized it as a Pokeball. It looked aged, though cracked in places. Red, ever so silent, mouthed two words to the professor as he gestured toward the Pokeball. "Help me." The professor backed away a little, but stopped as he saw Red was not going to react to anything he did. The professor stammered, "How can I help you, Red?" Once again, Red gestured toward the Pokeball, and Oak finally understood. "I'll do everything I can for you, Red." Red smiled at him, silently fading until the professor could no longer see him. Over the next several years, the professor constantly searched for a trainer, one worthy of helping the poor spirit of Red, but no matter how hard he searched, no one, not one trainer, could do the deed anyone who did dare to climb Mount Silver fled at the sight of Red's spirit. The professor was getting desperate, and in one last attempt, he consulted Lance of the Elite for help. Lance himself couldn't help, but he and Oak decided this. Before any trainer could be allowed entrance to Mount Silver, they must prove themselves worthy by defeating the Elite Four. This became the rule, and so they waited for the trainer that would be the one. For a long time, this trainer did not come, and they had begun to lose hope, until, that is, he came along during his time in Johto. The professor visited a childhood friend of his, Mr. Pio came on, who had offered to help the professor with his dilemma. When you met Professor Oak, he saw the potential in you as a trainer and offered you the coziest. He kept track of you, of your growth as a person and a trainer, up until your final battle in the Elite Four, where you proved your worth as a trainer because of this. The professor gave you access to Mount Silver, hoping you to be the one that could finally free Red. He didn't explain to you the plan, only hoping that you could handle it on your own. When you finally make your way to the top of Mount Silver, Red, as he normally would, is isolated on Mount Silver. He is honestly surprised when he sees you, for he has not had any challengers in a long time. You walk up to him without fear, and wordlessly, he challenges you to a battle. You accept, and the two of you engage in a battle powerful enough to shake the heavens. When the deed is done, and you have won the battle, Red does not speak. He wordlessly returns his last Pokemon. Afterwards, he is there for a brief instant, before disappearing from your view, and he is no longer there when you look. The body is gone as well. You stare at the place where he disappeared, and, though you couldn't be sure, you thought you had seen a faint smile forming on Red's face upon his defeat. Red had one last unspoken reply for you, his savior, who had freed him from the world at last. Thank you. The second story. Tick, tick, tick. When I was young, I liked Pokemon, as most kids did back in the day, despite being fairly young to the series, maybe about 6 or so. I played Pokemon Red and I loved it. Unfortunately, as I got into double digits, I went through that horrible phase where I thought that everything I loved when I was younger was childish. Of course, this included Pokemon, so I missed out on Pokemon Gold and Silver, Ruby and Sapphire, and even Fire Red and Leaf Green. Though early on in high school, I managed to get my hands on Pokemon Diamond. I loved Pokemon all over again. I didn't like the game itself, although I far from hated it. The whole concept, that gameplay of it, reminded me of why I loved the series in the first place. I went and bought everything I could. I managed to find a Fire Red and an Emerald in a local game traders, and I bought Heart Gold when it came out. Hell, despite having the remake, I even went back and played the original Red again. I'm even thinking of buying Yellow, as I never got a chance to play that, because I had both Red and Fire Red. I felt that I needed both Gold and Heart Gold, but Gold was hard to find, whereas in my game traders, who frequently stocked Yellow and the GBA games, they didn't stock any from 20 Gen. This irked me, so I went online to get a copy. Sure enough, I found one going for not $1, although that would have been nice, $20. It was the cheapest one there, so I bought it. It took about 3 weeks, but finally it arrived. I opened the package up and took the golden colored game out and placed it in my limited edition Pokemon, a Game Boy Color. Well, it technically wasn't mine, but my brothers and I share all our game stuff as if it's everybody's, and they didn't want it when they moved out. So the game screen starts up like normal, but there was no save before me. I was a little disappointed, as I would have liked to see how far the previous owner had gotten, and what team they had. Nonetheless, I started a new game. I named my character Gold Generic. I know, but hey, I'm a girl, I couldn't name him after me. And my rival Silver. Of course, the game played perfectly. That is, until I got to Violet City. Nothing was wrong with the city itself. Everything was fine. There was no creepy music, and I beat the monks at the Sprout Tower no problem. Nothing was wrong, but there was something wrong with Faulkner. Don't get me wrong, his sprite wasn't decaying or anything. He didn't say anything weird before the battle, and none of his Pokémon were harmed, either. It was after the battle which was weird. Instead of talking to me, I immediately get the badge. After the badge get, music finished, and the GOLD got the ZEPHYRBADZ text box disappeared. He simply said, I pressed A, and he went on, tick, tick, tick. I then got the TM, and was able to leave. That was it. I tried talking to him again, but he just says the same thing. I talked to his one trainer in the gym to see if he still says the same thing. Surprisingly, he said something different from when I last spoke to him. He is waiting. Who is waiting? And for what? That's a bit creepy, but I save and continue with the game. After that, I'm a little surprised to see that the game hasn't changed at all. It all plays out the way it's meant to. Maybe there was a glitch. I almost forgot about it until I come up to the next gym leader. Bugsy, the same thing happened. He said what he was meant to before the battle, but after, the badge was immediately gotten, and all he said was, tick, 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 and then the TM was obtained. And like Faulkner, he just say the same thing if I tried to talk to him again. I made sure to talk to the trainers after I beat them before I took on Bugsy, and they said nothing out of the ordinary. However, after Bugsy was beaten, one said the same thing Faulkner's trainer said. He is waiting. I assumed the other would just say the same thing, but I was wrong. The other simply said hurry. As I progressed through the game, I built my team. It consisted of TYPH Locion, UMB Rayon, Dragonair, Pseudo Widow, and to get IC. I don't like to travel my Pokémon. I feel they don't need one, but they were still my pals. I found that the storyline itself was fine. Not even Silver said anything out of his usual dicky character, but all the gym leaders had said the same thing when they were beaten. And depending on how many trainers in the gym there were, I'd get new phrases. When I had beaten Claire, I had gotten these phrases. He is waiting. Hurry. The badges must be obtained. He must be battled. The ticking must stop. By this point I assumed that this game was a hack, and may not have even been finished. If there was nothing wrong with it outside the gym leaders, I fly to New Barktown and go on my way to defeat the Elite Four. They all said the same thing when beaten. Tick, tick, and of course, they still said that if you tried to talk to them again, it was getting annoying. But Lance was last, and I thought that finally this ticking would stop. His team goes down fairly easily thanks to both Pseudo, Wood-O and Dragonair. After his defeat I was greeted with the upgrade. I think as I pressed the A button, but he said, don't keep him waiting. All of a sudden the screen goes black, then the credits rolled. Just like that, no congratulations on beating the Elite Four. No Hall of Fame. Just straight to the credits. The game restarts like normal, and I'm back in Gold's room. The game is normal once more, and I'm now able to go into Kanto. This was the part I was most excited about when playing Heart Gold, and thus I was just as excited playing it through on Gold. I start off with Janine, who was the lowest level out of all the Kanto gym leaders. She goes down easy. Unsurprisingly, her text appears, and all she says is, I click A, and she says something slightly different than all the others. Don't keep him waiting. Tick. Tick. The trainers don't say the same thing either. In fact, all they say is just now. I continue on, beating gym leader after gym leader, and they all say the same thing. By this point I had 13 badges. I just needed to wake up Snorlax and get to the other side of Kanto. I caught Snorlax and headed through the Diglett cave. Before I go to beat Brock, though, I went to Mount Moon to beat Silver for the last time. The battle was mine, of course, and Silver still can't believe he lost again, but he says something slightly different than what he's meant to. I lost again. GOLD. You should be careful there as something. Not right. And then he leaves. And he seems to run slightly faster than he did all the other times I beat him. But I put it past me and continue on to beat Brock. Of course, he says the same thing the other Kanto gym leaders say when they're beaten. The same with Blaine. I now had 15 badges, all that was left was Blue. I actually call him Green, but because the game called him Blue, I will to hear. The battle was close, but in the end I win again. The badge get, music plays automatically, and the text box with GOLD got the RTA, RTHBA pops up, but instead of the ellipses, I'm greeted with Gold's name. GOLD Blue says, stay away from MT. SILV, RD on T on T on T, listen to everyone else. Stay away from it. Everyone else? As in, those who said he is whizzing, and then it clicked. Mount Silver. Maud was waiting, but why did I need to stay away from him? I nervously click A to make Blue continue. For the sake of you and me, the ticking needs to continue. I don't know why, but that one sentence freaked the shit out of me. But I continue nonetheless, going to Oaks and getting permission to go to Mount Silver. Blue's words still went around in my head, but I was too curious not to go. And this was Red, right? You had to beat him in order to really complete the game. So when I went, I explored everywhere, grabbing all the items and looking everywhere. Finally, I found him. Red, he was looking the other way, of course, and I readied my Pokemon for battle and saved. Then I went up to him. I was met with his usual silence before the battle ensued. PKNNT, RINERED would like to battle. It was just as epic as it was in Heart Gold. I hardly cared that his Pikachu completely owned my team, but for some reason I didn't white out the screen, cut back to the overworld, and for the first time I heard, well, read Red speak. Tick, tick, tick. Then the screen turned white in the text box. Red GOLD whited out. For some reason, I find the ticking much creepier when Red does it. I then spent hours upon hours level grinding so I could beat the legendary trainer. I managed to get them all up to level 70, which I thought would do. After all, if my team in Heart Gold could beat his level 88 Pikachu and team at level 68, then my team in Gold can beat his level 80 to Pikachu and team at level 70, armed with stronger Pokemon and a bunch of revives, hyper potions and full restores. I was ready for him. I talked to him again, and again he says nothing. The battle starts, and again out goes Pikachu pseudo. Widow goes out first, and I get it to use Earthquake. Red Espic. Nachu obviously goes first, and it uses Iron Tail. Luckily though, it misses Earthquake, manages to take it down in one hit. Red then sends out Blastoise, and I don't have any type advantages for it, so I counter with Dragonite, using Outrage to take it down. I do, but Blastoise has also done a far damage on Dragonite, and her health is gone in the red zone. In the red zone, Venus is up next, and I switch out to get Icy it as fast and hits first with flying moves. landing super effective hits. However, they don't do a fat lot despite being super effective, and a Venusaur unfortunately takes down to get IC. I didn't want to use TYPH Loci on just yet, as he's my highest level Pokemon, but I had no choice. One eruption and Venusaur full Snorlax comes out next. Another eruption, and it takes off a bit more than half. One more and Snorlax also falls next as Espon. And UMB Rayon is sent out to take it on. Despite going first, most of Espon's attacks are psychic, and thus do nothing. A few faint attacks, and Espon faints as well. Charizard is last, and I leave UMB Rayon out. I use my turn to heal Dragonite for you, before UMB Rayon is taken down, and one hit by Charizard's Flame Harbour. Dragonite then comes out, and to Surf's later, Red's Charizard falls. I yell triumphantly. I always feel so proud after defeating Red. It cuts back to the overworld, and as usual, Red has his text box full of ellipses. I press A, but instead of it fading to black and him disappearing, the text continues. Boom. I feel a jolt of electricity and automatically drop the Game Boy. After a couple of seconds to recover from surprise, I look at it and see that it's switched off. I turn it back on, but it tells me that the save file has been corrupted. I try a new game, but it tells me the same thing. Then I realize, after Red, there is nothing once you beat him. There is nothing left to do. The ticking was leading up to that as long as Red was undefeated. Everyone could continue existing, but I beat him. And so he destroyed their world. Gold's world, S world, everyone S world, he destroyed it. He was waiting too. I should have listened to Brew, because now all I can hear is ticking, and I own a digital clock. For the sake of you and me, the ticking needs to continue. The third story, loss of purpose. Recently, I have gotten back into the Pokemon series. I have played all the games except for Red B. I was having a hard time getting a copy. None of the local video game stores had any new or used copies, and my parents wouldn't allow me to use eBay. But a couple weeks ago, my friend lent me what looked like an old Pokemon Red cartridge. He told me he didn't know if it was a working copy. It didn't look like it was. Its appearance made it look like it had been hammered multiple times. Apparently, his friend's dad had got it at a yard sale somewhere across the country. He got it for a great deal. The owner wanted to get rid of it so badly he only paid a quarter for it. This didn't really matter to me though. All I wanted to do was play the game. I inserted the cartridge into my Game Boy and turned it on. Thankfully, it flashed to the copyright information. It took me to the starting screen. The game had no save information. This didn't surprise me. The game was so beat up. I was just thankful it worked properly. I started a new game, and staying true to the plot, named my character Red. Soon I took my first steps into Pallet Town, making my way over to Professor Oak's lab. I named my rival Gary to keep it simple. The whole green and blue controversy had always confused me, and selected Charmander as my starter. I made my way over to Viridian Forest, all while appreciating the simplicity of the game. Soon I was initiated into my first real Pokemon battle, easily winning with my charm. Under the screen returned to the normal view of the forest, but instead of it letting me walk away, the bug catcher prompted me into a conversation. Now I shall stand forgotten. This statement confused me quite a bit. I tried to talk to the bug catcher again, but he wouldn't respond. Was this some part of the plot restricted? Tipio came on red, shaking the idea off. I continued on every trainer. I met said that after I battled them, reaching the exit to Viridian Forest, I exited and re-entered to attempt to speak to the trainers once again. They did not respond, but something had changed about their position. They were all facing to the right. I proceeded to my first gym battle, and won with a bit of effort after the battle. I expected the gym leader to say the same words as all the previous trainers, but instead, a box popped up that read these words: "Having served my sole purpose, I shall rest in silence." Then, surprisingly, he made his way out of the gym. I quickly walked out of the gym after him to try to see where he went. He was nowhere in sight. I went back into the gym, and he wasn't back in there either. In fact, none of the preliminary trainers were there. I rushed toward Viridian Forest, and upon entering I noticed all the trainers within it were gone. I continued on with the game, receiving eerie responses after every battle. After I had finished an area, they all faced a direction that was usually due east. After I defeated the gym leaders, they gave me the same responses as the first and walked out of the gym. The only time the response varied was when I faced Gary, who replied with, "I still have a purpose." Soon, I arrived within the vicinity of Lavender Town. I entered the city, and it started to play the eerie tune, giving the feeling of death creeping around every corner. But as I walked into the town, what I saw was much more frightening. The whole layout of Lavender Town had changed. The whole of the city uprooted and replaced with a horrifying sight. Around the ground there were multiple skulls and bones. In the center of the terror was a giant, leafless tree. On some of the tree's branches, there rested multiple skulls. The sight paired with the theme was overwhelming. I tried to turn down the volume, but the music only grew louder. As I turned it down, my Game Boy began to shake because of the intensity of the sound waves. I quickly turned it back up. Was this even possible? Recovering from the intensity of the music, I observed the scenery closer. I focused on the tree and noticed that all the branches that had skulls were consecutive on the left side, leaving a few on the right side empty. It was filling up. Deeply disturbed by this thought, all I wanted to do was get away from the town. I tried to quickly walk across the town to the exit, but as I'd entered, the field of skulls' red steps slowed down gradually, as did the town theme. As I began to reach the exit, the steps started to speed up again. What had I just seen? After I beat the trainers on Route 10, I exited and returned to see the routine turn of all the trainers. This time, they were facing south, and I realized they were all facing toward Lavender Town. Driven by pure curiosity, I continued on battling my way through the rest of the game. The trainers continued to disappear, repeating the same lines. Eventually, I reached the Elite Four. I beat the first four quickly and faced Gary. I defeated him this time instead of saying what he usually said. These words flashed on the bottom of the screen: "We will all be waiting in silence." He turned and walked out of the room confused. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I sat watching, waiting. Suddenly, another figure emerged and stood in front of Red. The battle initiated. The trainer who had challenged Red to a battle was Red. On the other side of the battle screen was his own sprite. The battle screen read, "You have challenged yourself to a battle." Automatically, my Red sent out his level 73 Charizard. The opposing Red sent out a level 100 Charizard naturally. The level 73 Charizard was defeated next. Red sent out a level 68 Raichu. The opposing red sent out a level 100 Raichu. The other red had exactly the same team as my red, except more powerful. He wiped out my red's team. The screen returned to the view of the two reds standing face to face. Words appeared on the bottom of the screen. Red was talking. Your purpose has been served. And it all before you exists alone. Forever. At once my red turned and walked out of the room. The screen turned black. It returned, fading into the image of the modified Lavender Town. But that wasn't what was unsettling. The music had been changed to what sounded like a reverse version of the normal theme. Sped up as like death was racing toward you. Red sprite came walking, slowing onto the screen and positioned himself in front of the tree. I do not want to be alone forever. And instantly, the screen cut black and the music ripped itself into an electrifying, loud-cursed screech. The screen faded back. In a few seconds later, and the normal Lavender Town theme returned. The focus was centered on the tree. I tried to open up the menu, but it wouldn't respond. Nothing happened when I moved the control pad either. Then I noticed there was one more skull than before. The screen blacked out at the center of the tree, and I understood Red had killed himself. Soon it all began to unravel. The skulls littered around the tree were the skulls of the trainers I had defeated along the way. The skulls resting upon the branches were the gym leaders, Elite Four, and Gary. I set down my Game Boy, my hands shaking in astonishment. They had all killed themselves, but why? Reflecting upon all the lines they had said after Rad had defeated them, they all conveyed the idea that they no longer had a purpose. They are nothing but characters in a game trapped. Once they served their purpose that they were programmed for, they would sit forever for no further reason to exist. No communication, no meaning. If you think deeply about it, it's worse than hell. Either they would be trapped like that forever, or they could die. They picked the best of the worst. Whatever was waiting for them after they died was surely better than what would have happened if they stayed. But why would Red kill himself? He was the main character. He would always have a purpose until the one controlling him stops playing. Eventually will come the day when we all are forced to stop everything. Then even Red himself will be sentenced to eternal solitude. His sole existence is to embody you, the player, in the world of Pokemon. So when you stop playing, essentially, it is him who is sentencing himself to death, defeating himself. I turned the Game Boy off and on. It returned to the starting screen, the save file still intact. I opened it and it returned to the view of the skull-bearing tree. I restarted the game once more and tried to select a new game. Text flashed on the bottom of the screen. The dead do not return, and took me back to Lavender Town. Every day after that, I returned to visit the tree with the dead trainers. It seemed stupid, but giving some kind of requiem to them felt right. The unrest stirred up by the game was somehow calmed. I did this for weeks. Then, one day, the internal battery died within the game. No matter how much I tried, the game wouldn't turn on. Red was gone forever. And when we cannot access our memories, there, we have truly died.